Welcome to the Rusted Garden. This is actually the introduction for my cucumber compilation. It's a complete guide for growing cucumbers, and I just want to do a quick introduction to say two things that are really important. Cucumbers are extremely heavy feeders, and while I'll do that, I'm going to show you what's going on in my grow closet. Cucumbers are extremely heavy feeders, so when you prepare the garden area, you want to use a lot of compost. You want to make sure there's a lot of organic fertilizer in the ground. And you want to just be prepared to use a water-soluble fertilizer every 7 to 10 days once your plants get growing, because they really do suck the life out of the soil. The other tip is when I'm talking about sprays, or anybody's talking about sprays, make sure you test spray before you go putting anything new all over your plants. So where I recommend often 1 tablespoon of baking soda per gallon, you could use 2 tablespoons of baking soda per gallon, but for instance, when it's cooler out, your plant leaves of your cucumbers can take 2 tablespoons of baking soda, but when it gets warm and the leaves kind of, droop a little bit from the heat, they can't really take that extra tablespoon of baking soda. So you have to experiment and know how to use the different sprays in your gardens, and that's really what's most important. There's a digital table of contents, so you can just jump through the most important parts that you want to see with respect to the cucumbers, and just kind of zip through to the points that are most important to you. And if you take a look right in there, these are upside down storage containers. You can grow cucumbers before it's really completely warm out in something like this. Just start them in large containers. You'll see that in the videos. And you can put them into something like this and just put them outside during the day, bring them in at night, and you will get your seed starts going without having to use grow lights. Hope you enjoyed the video. Welcome to the Rusted Garden. Today I want to talk to you about starting zucchini, cucumbers, squash indoors. And these are warm weather plants. A couple of things that are really important are to understand the difference between cool weather crops and warm weather crops. The cool weather crops like cabbage, kales, kohlrabi, radishes, they can sometimes take a light frost. They like the cold weather. Peas like the cold weather. They do really well. Your squashes, cucumbers, and zucchini need warm weather. So the first thing to really keep in mind is you want to plant these into your garden when the soil temperature is around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. You can of course get them in at 50, but I wouldn't really plant these before 50 degrees. If you put seeds into cold ground in this variety of plants, they usually don't germinate. Sometimes they rot. So definitely wait till your soil temperature is up. They require fertile soil. It's really important to use a lot of compost, organic matter, and they really enjoy nitrogen. So these have to be really well fed, soil that drains, soil that has nitrogen, soil that really just has a lot of compost. And if you can't get that or make it on your own, it's sort of important to pick it up at stores and really prepare the planting hole for it. They require lots of moisture, even consistent water, and the bottom line is water. If your cucumbers and zucchini dry out in containers, dry out in the ground, it really does impact the way that they grow. They really need consistent water throughout the growing season. Again, they like the warm weather, they like the heat, and come the heat, soil dries out really quickly, so you have to really keep the moisture level consistent. Full sun, these don't do well in shade. They like the warm weather, and again, heavy feeding plants. Now if you want to start them indoors, I recommend you start them in at least containers this size. The reason being that they don't really like to have their roots disturbed, so you want to be able to plant them from a good size container right into the ground. If you grow them in something like this, the roots will come out of here so quickly. When you go to pull them out, the roots tear, and it's just not a good setup. So you can use recycled containers like I do here. Certainly use 3-inch peat pots. If you use the peat pots, you can drop the whole pot right into the ground. You can use 8-ounce styrofoam cups. I use these a lot. You can go and buy containers like this. It'll cost you about $4 for a whole tray, and you can do your bigger warm weather crops right in here. And you can also just pick up a 7-pot seed starter, and it looks just like this, its own watering tray. Again, 3-inch pots. So that's the perfect size for the squash, zucchinis, and cucumbers. This is a squash plant. These were planted on January 20th. Today's Valentine's Day, the 14th. So they've been growing about 25 days. You want to do these plants 4 weeks before they would go into the ground. You don't really want them growing more. Because they're heavy feeders, right now, they're going to be looking for food. So you have to get them really into the ground. These get fed after about 2 weeks. They get fed liquid fertilizer, half strength, again, because they really need to be fed. At about 4 weeks, you're going to see the root ball looks like this. They're not quite coiled all under here, but this is the right time to get them into the ground. Now for your squash and your zucchini, you only want one plant in a planting hole. So you basically clip off the weakest plant. Either one of these could go. I'm going to go with the one that's just bigger. So this would be my zucchini plant. It will go into the ground just like that. Squash plant, cut off the weakest one. And again, I always plant 2 seeds, sometimes 3 seeds, just so that you're not waiting around for germination. And these are my cucumber plants. Cucumbers can go on a hill, they can go on a trellis, so you can either plant 1 or 2 or 3 into an area. It just depends. If you do that, you need to give them enough space to grow, and you also want to make sure the planting hole is really well prepared with compost, organic matter, and lots of fertilizer. You can use organic or synthetic. And again, at about the 4 week mark, you can see the roots are just starting to coil. So the timing for the cukes, the zooks, and the squash, about 4 weeks before they would be planted directly into your ground. The ground should be 60 degrees. They should be in full sun. And you can get a jump on the season by starting them indoors. You don't have to wait for the ground to get warm and put in some seeds. These will get growing quicker, and they'll get to your table quicker. These are national pickling cucumbers. They get to about 5 or 6 inches long, the cucumber fruits. And these are the straight 8 cucumbers, and they get to be about 8 inches, which are like the standard cucumbers you see in your grocery store. A couple of tips. I always start cucumbers in larger containers. You don't want to start them in the smaller cells. The roots will overgrow that cell quickly, and you're just going to damage the plant and shock the plant. So you always want to start in a container at least this size. For cucumbers, I recommend putting in 2 seeds, and when I plant these outside into the earth planting hole, I want 2 plants in there, either in containers or on the ground, but 2 plants in a space like this work perfectly fine outdoors. So 2 seeds, you could put in a 3rd seed. If all 3 come up, you're going to remove one, but you don't want more than 2 plants in these containers. And the reason that I like to do at least 2 seeds, you can see over here only 1 cucumber came up for the straight 8, only 1 over here. That doesn't mean the other seeds won't. Nothing came up over here. So this was 6 seeds, and only 2 plants came up. So with cucumbers, definitely put in 2 seeds, maybe 3 seeds, and then thin them down to 2 plants. Cucumbers, again, if you're going to start them indoors, you want to do about 4 weeks before the soil is warm. 60 degree nights is really what you want. These grow best when it warms up. So about 4 weeks before that soil temperature of 60, those nights of 60 come into play in your area. Again, let me show you, when you start your starting mix, it's really important. When you first put this in here, it looks great, but it's too loose, and you can see how much it fluffs down. You want a really solid planting base so that your seed doesn't fall down here, and then it's not going to germinate the right way. Once you pack it down, it's called thumb packing, thumb pack it down, add some more soil to it, and then you have a nice solid starting base for your cucumbers. You can plant 2 cucumbers per cell here, and these cells are larger. You don't want to use the tiny little cells for these. I go down about a ½ inch with my finger, and I'm doing 2 varieties of cucumbers. Cucumbers don't like having their roots disturbed, so you want to start them indoors really in a larger container. A styrofoam cup I use sometimes, so that when they're ready for transplant, you're not disturbing the roots. The little tiny cells like this are just too small. They'll germinate, they'll look good, but when you transplant them, they're going to be in a little bit of shock. So these holes, it's 2 holes per cell, about a ½ inch deep. I also, again, 4 weeks, if you're doing it indoor, 4 weeks before the soil's ready. But I also, with cucumbers, these take about 45 to 65 days to mature. I put in a second batch of cucumbers, so to speak, into my garden. So in the beginning of July, I will do this outside. I'll set it up the same way, put the cucumbers in as I'm going to show you in a second, and then this just sits in a shadier area in my yard so the sun doesn't dry out. But it sits outside, these transplants mature and get ready, so when my other cucumbers burn out, I have mature transplants ready to go in, and that will just save you a lot of time actually. You can save 4 weeks of growth by starting your transplants outdoors and then just replacing the bad plants or the plants that die off. Well, trying to open this gently, but it's not working. Prop failure. Alright. So once you get your seed pack open, you're just going to put 1 seed per hole. 2 should come up. When you plant these in the ground, you can have 2 or 3 cucumber seeds in one space. The cucumber packet talks about hills and spacing and stuff. What I find is 2 seeds works great. I like to have them climb up my fence. They should have something to climb on. That works the best. I'll show you in other videos how you can build trellises and stuff for them. So that was actually the National Pickling. You want to just make sure you label that. These are the straight 8. These also take about 45. These packs are hard to open. 45 days to 55 days to mature, and they grow quickly again when that soil temperature and the nights are about 60 degrees. And then it's just 1 seed per hole, 2 seeds per cell. And then I mark them all the time with a popsicle stick, put the name on there so you know what they are and the date on the back. And then just drop some soil on there. Random cucumber seed. And just lightly press it in. You want to make sure the soil has good contact with the seeds. And again, for watering, I always say in every video, don't water from the top. You'll just splash the starting mix out, the seeds around. Always water from the bottom, and you just want the water to fill up to about here. After 20 or 30 minutes, whatever water is not absorbed from the bottom, the top should look moist, just pour out. Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today I want to talk to you about when do you fertilize your squash, zucchini, and cucumbers. When do you fertilize your indoor plants? A couple of things to keep in mind is sometimes your starting mix has no fertilizer in it. If you buy like a Miracle-Gro product, it will have fertilizer in there, and it's usually a low amount. Sometimes I will add fertilizer to my starting mix, but I do it at half strength. And that's the whole key of this video, is your plants don't need full dosings of fertilizer in the starting mix, or they don't need full dosings of the liquid fertilizer while they're growing like this. Half strength. Some people even use quarter strength. So regardless if your plants have fertilizer in the starting mix or not, you're going to fertilize with a half strength liquid fertilizer, maybe a quarter strength if you want. You're going to fertilize these plants when they have a true leaf. This is a zucchini, that's a true leaf. These are the 2 leaves that actually break the surface. That's a true leaf. Here's a cucumber, it has a bigger true leaf. These are the 2 leaves that break the surface. And this is a early yellow squash, and you can see how much bigger it got. And it really has 2 leaves, but somewhere around, here you want the first fertilizing, and you can see this plant is staying healthy. So you don't have to be super exact, but you're probably going to fertilize them at about 2 weeks. These plants were planted on January 22nd. Today is the 12th of February. So this is 3 weeks of growth. They grow pretty fast. Here's an organic product. It's made from beet juice, and on the back it has 8 for nitrogen, which is great for the leaves, 0 for phosphorus, 0 for potassium. This would not make a good liquid fertilizer for your indoor transplants. You want all the main numbers to be represented, N, P, and K. Now when I say represented, there's not an exact number that works. If I could pick one, a 3-6-3 would be great. 3 nitrogen, 6 phosphorus, 3 potassium. But gardening is something that's done all over the globe, and everybody doesn't have access to organic or inorganic fertilizer. Sometimes people have to make it themselves. They can't just go to the store and, find 8, 10 different kinds of fertilizer. So don't worry about that. The main key for this is half strength. Whatever you buy as a liquid fertilizer, make sure it has NPK numbers, that it's represented with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and then use it at half strength. I like to use a product that's really for new plants. This has a 4-16-8, so it's 4 nitrogen, 16 phosphorus, 8 potassium. So at half strength, that's going to be a 2-8-4. That's pretty good. This is what I like to use. So you look for the leaves to be about this size. That'll be at about the 2-week mark. Just make the liquid fertilizer, fertilize from the bottom, fill up the tray with the water and fertilizer, let it absorb in, and you really only probably need to fertilize these plants once, maybe twice, once at the end. But only, at the 2-week period, you'll give them what they need to grow. The roots will develop, the leaves will develop. In about 4 or 5 weeks, these should get out into the garden. Hope you enjoyed the video, and just remember, it's half strength. Don't stress about the NPK. Just make sure all 3 of those nutrients are represented in your liquid fertilizer. Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today's Memorial Day, and I want to show you how I set up the planting areas for planting cucumbers. But this is also how I set it up for cucumbers, squash, and zucchini. They're heavy feeding plants, so you really want to provide enough organic matter and fertilizer in your space so that your plant will thrive through the growing season. And I set this up a little bit differently than a lot of my other plants. I put in a bag of humus manure. That's chicken pellets and some other composted material. But the NPK in there is 0.15, 0.15, and 0.15. So it's a low amount of NP and K, but it will be available for most of the growing season for the cucumbers, squash, and tomatoes. I'm not going to show you how I put it into the ground because I think that would sort of waste your time, but I'm going to talk about it because it's pretty easy to set up. In this space here, I grow cucumbers. I'm going to show you some trellising options too. I put in a bag and a half of the composted manure, the humus manure, in this whole area, and then I work it down to about 12 inches into the soil, 10 or 12 inches, and that just sets it up for the growing season. Then I dig a hole to about that depth, and I use I'm using an organic fertilizer, but I use both. It's about a 5-5-5 fertilizer, and I'll put 2 tablespoons right into that hole, and then use the shovel to really mix it into about, 8 inches or so. You just don't want the root system to sit on fertilizer, be it organic or chemical. And then, fill it in to a depth right just like that. And that sets up my cucumbers, squash, and zucchini to start growing. Now, these are transplants that I started actually 6 weeks ago, and typically you want to start these about 4 weeks before they're ready to go into the ground because they grow really quickly. However, we had weird weather with 18 days of rain, so they grew a little bit more slowly, and which is okay, but you can see that the root systems of the cucumber aren't coiling around. There's plenty of room for growth. So time this for your transplants about 4 weeks before they would go into the ground. This is a squash, this is a spaghetti squash, and they're starting to get a little bit coiled, but just break them up a little bit, and that's how they would get planted into the ground. For cucumbers, I put 2 to a space. You can thin them down if they both take off and grow. What's the difference? If you're using just one cucumber, the maintenance is a little bit easier. If you have a lot of leaf growth, there's more chances for disease, so you have to maintain them a little more. So that's a market more. It's growing on this trellis that is just a rack from Home Depot for a closet that I secure to a couple pressure treated, I think they're 1x1s. They're used for deck railing. Here's another trellis made out of chicken wire. Those are for pickle bush. Those cucumbers won't grow as big as the market more. And then here's another teepee type trellis that I'll let those cucumbers grow right up there. Let me go show you a couple more that are growing. I'm in the midst of getting everything in for my warm weather crops. I'm going to do a whole video of this area in a little bit. So right in here along the fence line, or close to the fence, that's an Armenian cucumber. That one actually didn't get the manure in there. This is a straight 8 that got the manure mixed into it, and they will grow along the fence. If you're tight for space, you can grow them in large containers. The bottom of that container is cut out, and that's set up with really, I think, 3 tablespoons of the organic fertilizer in there. And those are bush champion right there, pickle bush. They will actually grow up the tomato cage. Coming around this way, I have some more cucumbers that are growing in another container there. And I can see that actually just from last night, ants moved into there. I'm going to have to take care of those. But they're going to grow up yet another trellis. And these are just some ways you can grow your cucumbers. Here's a squash that I'm going to grow up the tomato cage. It's supported by an extra stake because they do get heavy. That makes it easier to manage the squash, also get under the leaves to take care of disease and bugs. And let's see, I got one more in here. That's going to grow up a cage. And then I have my round zucchini back there that'll just grow free. But the most important thing for setting up your cucumbers, your squash, your zucchinis is to really amend the soil. Get in your organic fertilizers, get in, if you want to use chemical fertilizers, that's fine, about a 5-5-5, and also put in some composted manure to really give them a base to grow into, because they are heavy feeders, and you will notice sometimes when you plant them, they start out great and then they start to yellow a little bit. That's because they're just sucking the life out of the soil. Today I wanted to show you a couple of quick ways you can grow cucumbers. These plants I've been taking lots of videos of. These are an 11-inch cucumber plant and a 3-inch cucumber plant. And what I wanted to just show you is that you can grow cucumbers in half-sunken containers. The bottoms are cut out so that the roots can reach the earth. And these cucumbers are just growing up large tomato cages. And there's about 2 plants on each cage. There's another cage in there. And that's one way to support and grow your cucumbers upwards, and it gives you a lot more space in the garden. Another way you can grow them is to build a trellis out of chicken wire and bamboo poles. And you can see I have another cucumber right here. And all you do is, gently lift the vine and turn it in. And this plant's doing really well too. And the trellis gives you vertical growth in your garden, which saves you a lot of space. Now, here's a tomato cage. Here is a trellis, and these are my Armenian cucumbers. And I did make a mistake by, I guess, putting on 4 plants onto this trellis, and these poles were 2 years old. So they snapped over last night's rain, so I'm going to have to repair that, but it should be okay. If you do use a trellis, you want to make sure you don't overplant it with vines, because the weight of the vines when they're mature could snap the poles. Standard cucumber growing up along the fence. And let me show you one more place I'm growing cucumbers. You can grow cucumbers. That is a full container. I just saw a rabbit that's been eating my my beans down. That's a container. It's a large container with fresh soil in it, which has a lot of organic matter, and there's holes cut out in the bottom so the roots can reach the ground. But I'm growing that cucumber up my apple tree. My apple tree's lost just about all of its apples to the squirrels. They tend to pick them and take them away. So I figured, why not I'll grow a cucumber up. Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today we're going to talk about cucumber trellising. We're going to take care of some problems that are going on. I'm going to give you a tour of the different trellises just so you can see how effective they are. We're going to take care of this yellow pattern that are on the cucumber leaves, and we're going to use Epsom salts. Now the key with that, it's magnesium sulfate. Some people consider it organic, some people don't. It's a naturally occurring compound, but it provides magnesium and sulfur to your plants, and you only really need to use it once or twice in a growing season. Don't overdo it. But I'll go over the formulation for that. We're also going to take a look at how we can put in a quick trellis for these purple hull pink eye peas, which I thought were actually bush type, but they're not. So we'll go over that, and then I'll just give you a general tour, and I will actually. I'm going to show you how I'm using peppermint spray to deal with insects and issues with all the plants in my garden. But we're going to put it on the bean plants, we're going to put it on the cucumber plants. So the first thing I did was take care of the purple hole pink eye cowpeas. You really want to make sure you have space in between your rows so air can circulate. And this is just green fencing post. It has a lip down here, and you just, you know, pound it into the ground with a nice little sledgehammer until that sinks to the bottom, and this is nice and secure. Put one on this end, one on the other end, and then just strung the jute across all the way up, and then weaved the cowpeas through there. And you really want to get them off the ground, and again, keep this space in there. The next thing that I did was really just sprayed the undersides of the leaves, and that will wash off all of your possible spider mites, aphids, you know, insects that you don't want, that are small, that are weak. Wash them to the ground, and that will really actually reduce a lot of the problems for spider mites and aphids. And the most important thing, as I was spraying under the leaves, I did find 4 squash bugs on the top of this cucumber here. So also inspect for eggs from insects. Also look for the insects and remove them if you find them. That will also greatly reduce damage from insects coming to your plants. And this cucumber is being supported by an 8-foot stake and chicken wire, and you can see it's loaded with flowers, and they're starting to bloom. There's cucumbers, there's female flowers that have the cucumbers on it, there's male flowers, so that should be producing in about a week, and it's doing really, really well. That's also good to get fed with the Epsom salt and with the fish fertilizer. I'll show you how to do that in a second. A single 8-foot post works really, really well for beans, because they will twine around it. It's not going to really work for cucumbers because they have tendrils and they need something to really wrap around, and that's why the chicken wire works really, really well. This is a 10-foot piece of chicken wire with plastic covered metal going down the side, so it's 5 feet high, and it's just a triangle stuck into the ground. And I believe those are some sort of cantaloupe that are going to grow up the back there, but you could do that for your cucumbers too. And this is what the trellis, the cucumber's on, it's made with the chicken wire. This just gives you an idea of how to make it. And it's just posts and chicken wire. These are my purple potted peas. They are finally blooming. But you can also use this not only for cucumbers, but for your pole beans. And it works really, really, really well. All right, Epsom salt. So all these plants are sprayed down with water to get rid of the soft-bodied insects, aphids, spider mites if they're there. And we're going to address that yellowing pattern on the cucumber leaves. That doesn't mean there's something massively wrong with your plants. Could be nutritional, could be the crazy heat we've been having, could be, you know, I missed a watering and the leaves got a little bit damaged. It can be different things, but we're going to address it sensibly. We're going to add, at this point with this high growth for the plants, water-soluble fish emulsion, which is a 5-1-1 fertilizer, and we're just going to add some Epsom salts. The key with Epsom salts is not to overdo it. You do not need to do this weekly. You do not need to do this monthly. You could get away with it doing it monthly. It's not going to hurt your plants. But all we're doing here is kind of giving it a supplement, like taking vitamins. We're giving it a boost of magnesium, a boost of sulfur to help green it up. I've already put in, this is a 2-gallon container. You can put in 1 to 2 tablespoons per gallon, but I've only put in 2 tablespoons here, so I'm using 1 tablespoon per gallon. And again, it's water soluble for the Epsom salt and for the fish emulsion. We could just drench the leaves, that would work perfectly fine. And because it's water soluble, the leaves would take in some of that nutrition, but I'm just going to put it right into the root system. This is not an emergency, this is just addressing the high growth needs of the cucumber plants. So again, my container is a 2-gallon container, and people often ask, how much do you put in? So I actually want to just show you that. That's going to be about a half a gallon on that plant. About a half a gallon on that plant, and that will just soak right down into the root systems. And maybe not even quite a half a gallon, but close to that. Now beans do fix their own nitrogen, but I'm going to give them a little bit of feeding. And then I'm going to water in just the base of these cowpeas. And that's it. That's plenty of nitrogen and plenty of Epsom salt to help green this plant up. And I'll do future videos just to show you how this plant responds to this treatment. All right, let's get to cleaning up the leaves, looking for disease, and using the peppermint spray. So I just wanted to show you the difference between male and female flowers. That's a male flower right there. It's a yellow flower and it's just a stem behind it. And a lot of times your cucumbers will produce tons of male flowers and then the female flowers will come. And that is a flower, and right beneath it is a tiny cucumber. If that gets pollinated, if a bee goes from the male flower to the female flower, then that cucumber will grow and become a full cucumber that you can harvest. If it doesn't get pollinated, it'll start to grow a little bit, then the tip of the cucumber will brown out and it will die off. And that's the difference, is that a female plant has the cucumber, but it has to be pollinated by the male flower for it to fully mature. So I removed some of the leaves from underneath the cucumber plants. That's just to help with airflow. Also, the leaves on the bottom tend to yellow and get weak, and that's not a sign of some strange disease coming. That's just the bottom leaves, the old leaves dying off. And if there were watering issues or heat issues, usually the leaves on the bottom of your plants die off first, so I just removed them. On the bean plants, and I might have been saying peas because they're cowpeas, but on the bean plants they look pretty good. Took off a lot of the bottom leaves. I put all my leaves into a pile after I do that. Look on the undersides for eggs. I didn't find any. Didn't find any insects. Earlier I did find squash bugs. I killed those. This pattern on this leaf right here, all that's a leaf miner. Now, because I only found it on one leaf, I'm not that worried. But if you had a lot going on, you had a lot of this kind of pattern, you might want to use neem oil or some sort of spray to control that. Looking at the rest of the plants, they look pretty good. When you have your bean plants or your plants on the bottom dying off, sometimes they get patterns on there like that. That's not necessarily a disease. That's just a weak leaf that maybe can't fend off what's growing on it now, so the weak leaves will show signs of what's in your garden. But a healthy leaf, a healthy plant, can fend that off, and it's not really a worry. Again, bottom leaves, and on some of these you can see a little bit of a white powder on there. That's a preventive spray I'm using. I know that powdery mildew starts rolling in about now in my area, so I am spraying my cucumber plants, my squash plants with a fungicide. So when you cut off leaves from your plant, you damage the plant. Pheromones come out, an odor comes out. The bad insects can smell that, and that's really how they find host plants. If a leaf is damaged, or even if the plant is healthy and the wind's blowing through it, the squash bugs can smell the squash bug plant. They come, they land on it, they lay eggs, they do what they do. So the peppermint spray really helps mask the odors of your plants, makes it hard for insects to find them. Also has some insecticide properties to it, also has some fungicide properties to it. I'm not so convinced about that, but it is really, really working when I spray the undersides of the leaves for managing aphids and spider mites, and I feel like I have a reduction in squash bugs since I've been using it over the last 4 weeks. Let me show you how I do that. The peppermint spray is really easy to make. You want peppermint oil, and you want 1 drop per 2 ounces. So if you're making, a spray bottle worth, it's easier to go by drop. If you're doing a gallon container like this, it's about 1/2 teaspoon to 1 teaspoon of peppermint oil with enough soap just to help the oil disperse through the water so that when you spray it, oil gets on the undersides of each leaves. Now, no matter where you find a recipe, if it comes from me or from other people, always test spray before you use it. Lots of factors impact how a spray may damage your garden, including hot weather and stuff like that. But at this ratio, I found that it's pretty effective for most plants without damaging them. But again, I want you to test spray, and that means you spray a couple of leaves, wait 24 hours, 48 hours, and see if there's any damage. So the peppermint spray is in here, shake it up, and then just spray the undersides of your plants. Just like that. Really coat the leaves. If there's eggs or bad insects under there, you'll coat that. Spray the top. I found that it does not harm bees. And you are just putting a light coat of peppermint spray all across your cucumbers. I would make sure I get under the leaves, because it's really not effective 100% if you're just spraying the top of the leaves. And that's all I do with the peppermint spray. It smells wonderful. I really believe that there's value to this in keeping away spider mites, aphids, and other problematic insects. So I'm going to be doing this regularly now as part of my garden routine. Also going to be selling this oil on my garden shop eventually, probably this week, but you can buy peppermint oil in many places and go ahead and use that to make your spray. Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today I want to show you how to make an inexpensive trellis with minimal construction. This is a 6 foot piece of shelving unit that I got at Home Depot. It was $8.97. It's going to last you at least 5 years. So if you think about the cost spread over 5 years, it's relatively inexpensive. That's, you know, under $2 a year. These are baluster posts that are used for making railings on your deck. You can get these for 99 cents at Home Depot. They already have a point cut on them. If you can't find this, you want a piece of wood that's at least 36 inches, maybe 40 inches long, because this has to be hammered into the ground at least a foot to support the trellis. On this trellis you can grow peas, pole beans, summer squash, winter squash, cucumbers, and even some of the smaller melons. So growing vertically is going to save you a lot of space in your garden, and I'm really going to be able to pack in a lot more of the vine crops in here in this little 2 foot by I think 6 foot space by growing up the trellis than if I were just letting, you know, one vine crawl around on the ground. I'm going to show you how to build this, and again, inexpensive, quick build. It's going to take you more time to go out and get these supplies than it is to really set it up. I bet you could do this probably literally in 10 minutes. So I'm just going to show you how to tie this on. The first thing I want to show you is the shelving unit is 6 feet tall, 1.8 meters, and it's only about 12 inches wide or 30.2 centimeters. So that's the piece that you're looking for. You could get something bigger if you want, but I actually prefer to have 2 smaller ones, and I'll explain that to you in a second. All you're going to really have to do is hammer in the balusters. It's about 36 inches, 40 inches pieces of wood. Make sure you nail it down a good foot, because that's what's going to support this. And all you do is tie the shelving unit onto there. The upper parts, you should wrap the jute or your string around it twice, because that's where the most pressure is going to be. And then the same thing over on the other side. I'm not going to tie all of them, just save you some time. But that's how you're going to secure it on there. And then I would tie another piece in the middle, another piece on the bottom, and I do that 3 pieces on the outer points. And then for this piece you could do 3 if you want, or you could just tie it right in the center. That's going to secure your shelving unit right to the post, and that's going to be plenty strong enough to hold whatever vine crop you have growing up through here. Here are the finished trellises. That's my 2 foot by 6 foot plot. I'm going to grow pole beans up them, maybe some cucumbers. 3 posts will secure the shelving unit nicely to the ground. The posts are in a foot. I really have to stress, make sure the wood that you use to post the shelving unit to is at least a foot in the ground. That's what's going to secure the whole unit. And then I just tied the unit right to the posts. One of the things I talked about is you don't really need a shelving unit that's more than 12 inches wide. These are 6 feet high, and if you need to add something, you can put in a bamboo post just like that one, and you can see how it'll give more space growing out to the left. And on this one, you could add it up top, and you could have more climbing space going up higher. Now these are already 6 feet tall, so you don't want the vine to get too high. You're not going to be able to reach the fruit. So this unit was about 12 inches wide. The reason that I want 12-inch wide units is because what you would do, let's see if I can do it with the camera, is you let the cucumber grow up, because they typically, you know, can grow probably 10, 12 feet. So you let the cucumber grow up, and then you train it across, use that foot gap to your advantage over to there, and that'll take up some of the length of the vine. Let the cucumber grow up that one, and then bring it back across this way. And you would do that with any vine. This way you can take a 12-foot vine and just weave it up your trellis and then over to the other one, and this way you're able to manage the fruit. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll do more on this trellis when I do some of the plantings. Oh, real quick, leave a little bit of gap if you're using a raised bed, because you could put your pea seeds or bean seeds right down there. But I'll do some planting videos, and I'll show you some growth videos. Today I wanted to show you how to identify and treat powdery mildew on your cucumbers and related plants. And right away, these are my standard 11-inch cucumbers. You can see on the leaves white powder, white powder, white powder, white specks. That is powdery mildew, and it usually comes in my area about well, today's August 1st, towards the end of July and middle of August. It likes the heat and humidity, and it will spread across your entire cucumber, yellow the leaves, and kill the leaves off. It doesn't really hurt the cucumbers, although it can grow into cucumbers, but as the leaves die out, your plant will die out. The easiest way to treat it is to spray it with baking soda mixed in 1 gallon of water. I use 1 tablespoon of baking soda in a gallon of water for the cucumbers. This is specifically for the cucumbers. You could use a little bit more. As your temperature goes up, if it's 90, 95 degrees, 100 degrees, you want to use, you want to use 1 tablespoon of baking soda. But if it's cooler, you could use a little bit more. It's starting to get yellow dots. Now those yellow dots could be from the powdery mildew, could be from insects. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to spray the outer leaves and the under leaves with soapy water. The soapy water will kill soft body insects, and this is kind of a way to maintain your cucumber. I'm also going to give this cucumber some liquid fertilizer. I'll give it a gallon of water with a measured tablespoon of Miracle Grow as I direct you to use that. You can use a more organic liquid fertilizer like fish emulsion, whatever you have or whatever you want to use. I also like it because this button, I recommend you getting a sprayer like this for soapy water, is when you push it down you can then insert the button and it keeps spraying. So the first thing you want to do is spray everything with soapy water. If you want to tap your your cucumber, you can do that. That will get rid of all the flying insects like the bees and stuff you like. All the pests won't go far from the leaves. But you basically get the idea. You want to spray the underside of the leaves and the top of the leaves just to kill out anything that might be there. This won't hurt your cucumber. The reason that I sprayed the soapy water first is because I don't want to wash off the baking soda. Once you spray the underside of your leaves and the upper parts of your leaves with the soapy water, you're just going to come on over to your baking soda spray. You're going to spray all the leaves, but really soak down where the powdery mildew is. And this sprayer is a little bit flat, but you get the idea. So you really don't be afraid to soak it down. Soak down your cucumber, soak down the powdery mildew with the baking soda spray, and that should take care of it. You can repeat it every 3 days for, I don't know, about a week or so. But you'll notice that the powdery mildew does disappear with this treatment. Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today I want to show you what powdery mildew looks like on your squash leaves. You can also find it on cucumber leaves, zucchini leaves, any kind of broad leaf like this. Come the high humidity, the warm days and warm nights, lots of rain, you can get powdery mildew pretty easily on your plants. The best thing to do is to look for it, learn what it looks like, and then you can treat it. And I'll talk about the treatment in a few minutes. You can see these leaves are starting to get yellow specks on them, and you can see little white patches. That's the powdery mildew starting on this squash plant. If you go over here, you can see it more prevalent down there. The white spots, that's the powdery mildew. As you move through the plant, behind here you can see it a whole lot more. And what it starts to do is it'll turn your leaves yellow and it'll kill off your leaf, but it will spread through this whole vine. And the best way to treat it is 1 tablespoon of baking soda in 1 gallon of water, and just soak the top of the leaves and the bottom of the leaves. And it's a striped beetle, and this is what it looks like. I captured these, actually, 1 this morning and 1 last night, so they're still around, and hopefully you can see they have black and yellow stripes, and that's what they look like. If you see those on your plants, it's really a sign, 1, you need to treat it, but 2, to really pay attention that all the beetles are starting to come out. The squash bugs, the stink bugs. And when you see them, 1, of course, treat it. I'm going to be doing some videos on how to do that. But I really wanted to just show you, start checking the underside of your leaves, because you can see egg masses right there. There's 2 masses of eggs. They are not from the striped cucumber beetle. They tend to lay their eggs down at the base of the stem. But when you see beetles, that usually means, here's another clump of eggs right in there. That usually means you got different kinds of bugs, beetles crawling around in your garden, and they're starting to lay the eggs on the underside of your cucumber plants. That might be another clump right there too, so there's 3. on the underside of the leaves of the cucumber plants, the squash plants, the zucchini plants. So again, here's the striped cucumber beetle. That's what it looks like. And when you see these, it's really a sign that you need to start checking the undersides of your leaves, because you will have eggs deposited, and you really want to just remove those. You can treat them with a spray if you want, or you can just cut them out and take them off your plant. This is one of my cucumber, I guess, plots, so to speak. They are both in sunken containers down there. There's 2 plants in each one, which probably I should only put 1 in there, but I always overplant. But you can see how well the plant is really doing. It's really, really green. It's July 16th here. With our heat, humidity, and rain, a lot of times cucumbers get disease and get beat up. I've been spraying this with neem oil, actually, about every 7 to 10 days, the undersides of the leaves and the top side, to really manage what you see down there. They were getting, I think, insect damage. I'm not the best with identifying all the cucumber diseases, but I'm pretty good at knowing when the soft-bodied insects and mites are attacking my cucumbers. The neem oils really seem to help with keeping this plant green and mostly healthy, which, you know, I'm very happy with. This plant is loaded with flowers. Believe it or not, as big as this plant is, I have not picked but 1 cucumber off the plant, actually 2, and they were down at the bottom. All these, and here's part of the problem. There's 1 cucumber. That's a female flower. These little ones that don't have a cucumber behind it are all male flowers. For whatever reason, and my guess is it's sometimes just related to the temperature and what's going on, and also the variety of the plant, these are loaded with male flowers and very few female flowers that will bear fruit. And that may change. In here there's 2 more that I saw, so that's a female plant, and you can see the flower has died out. Hopefully it was pollinated, but there just aren't a lot of female flowers on here that will bear cucumbers. The plant is doing really, really well. So again, I'm spraying this about every 7 to 10 days with neem oil to manage the bugs. Also using a liquid fertilizer about a little bit more regularly, maybe every 7 to 10 days. Cucumbers are really, really heavy feeders. This has also been side dressed with, you know, pelleted fertilizer. You really want to keep your plants fed. That's probably the #1 thing that happens to cucumbers a lot, is they really take the nutrients out of the soil and they turn yellow. One more thing that I do is at about July 1st, or within that week, I plant more cucumbers. They grow really, really fast in the warmth. I use 16-ounce cups. They need a big base for the root system to develop. I do that just in case my plants die out or something happens. I can quickly replace it with a young plant that's been growing for a while, and this plant will mature and bring me cucumbers through the end of August and into September. These are actually going to go into a trellis that I made out of shelving, and they'll start growing up there. But it's always a good idea to grow a couple of backup plants right in the garden with, well, alongside of the plants that are doing really well. Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today I want to talk about how you can start squash and zucchini, they're in these trays, and cucumbers in cups. These are to get your transplants ready for the garden. Today is May 8th. These were started on April 20th, so it's been 18 days, almost 3 weeks, and that's usually the target. You want to start these somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks before you would put them into your containers or into the ground. The zukes and the zucchinis, usually I say put in 2 seeds, maybe 3, and then you're going to thin it to the strongest plant. There's so many packed in here because some of these seeds were actually 3 years old and I didn't think that they would germinate, but they did. When you go to thin your plants out, you're going to want to cut them out because you don't really want to disturb the roots of the squash, zucchini plants, or cucumbers. So just cut them off. So I'm going to thin these down, the squash and the zucchini, to 1 plant, and for my cucumbers I thin them down to 2 plants. Let me do that and I'll come back. Squash, zucchini, and cucumbers have been thinned down. Squash and zucchini, you only want 1 plant per cup, and you only want to plant 1 plant per planting hole in your earth beds. These plants will get really, really large. You don't want 2 next to each other. Cucumbers, you can certainly just do 1 plant if you want, but they're fine if you have 2 plants per cup, and you can put 2 plants in per planting hole. Now these plants have been growing for 18 days. I started them on April 20th, and you want to time things so that your night temperatures are about 50 degrees, your soil temperatures has warmed up to about 50 degrees, and your days are in the 70s and 80s. These are warm weather plants. They like the warm weather, and they're not going to really thrive and grow unless you have those soil conditions. So you kind of look for the date, as I mentioned in other videos, of when you have 50 degree nights, 70 plus degree days, and then you subtract back by 2 to 4 weeks. These plants germinate quickly, they get to size pretty quickly, so really you want them to get into the ground between 2 and 4 weeks. You don't want to go beyond 4 weeks. What will start happening is, if you leave them in these cups, they'll get root bound, they'll actually start to flower, and it just messes up the whole plant. You want these to go from these cups right into the ground when the root systems are starting to coil around the bottom of the cups. And you can see in this plant, it's really close. This one could go out into the garden this weekend. They're starting to coil. Cucumbers don't grow quite as fast as the zucchini and squash, but they should be down to the bottom and they're starting to coil. So really between the 3rd and 4th week, these plants are going to be ready to go in the ground. These big oval leaves are not true leaves. They're going to turn yellow and die off. These are the true leaves. This big leaf here, this leaf over here, that leaf. In the cucumbers, that's a true leaf. These leaves break the surface first. That's what helps the plant get established. And the zucchini, squash, cucumbers, all seeds actually live off of the seed. That's what provides them nutrients. When you start seeing this leaf, the plant is really using up all the nutrients from this seed. So you can give these a light fertilization, a light feeding with a half-strength liquid fertilizer. You can use whatever you want to use. But a light feeding will help these out and keep them going well. Today I wanted to show you the difference between male and female cucumber flowers and how to hand pollinate them. And you saw the bumblebee going through my flowers, and that's basically how a cucumber is pollinated. The bee, or the pollinating insect, crawls from flower to flower collecting pollen on its legs, and it just transfers the pollen across flowers. The first thing you need to do is be able to identify male flowers, and the male flowers look like these right here. It's just a flower, and underneath of it is no cucumber. It's just a stem. Again, flower, beneath it is just a stem. And you can see a good version there. It's just a flower, stem, flower, and underneath that is a stem. When you look here, you can see, let me get it in focus. When you look here, you can see a cucumber, and on top of that will be a flower. It's not bloomed yet. That is a female flower. There's a stem, then a small cucumber, and then a flower. That is a female flower. To hand pollinate, you basically take a soft paintbrush and you want to go right to the center of the flower and gently twist it around. And do that in several male flowers, touching the bottom and the center of the flower. And you want to go to a couple of plants, a couple of flowers. And when you collect the pollen, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but you can see on the tip yellow specks. That's the pollen. Now, for some reason, these plants have many male flowers and no female flower for me to show you actually how to do it. So we're going to pretend. So if you found the female cucumber, the female flower, you look for the cucumber. If that flower were open, you would just take the toothbrush, you would just take the paintbrush and go straight into the flower and gently twist it around, and that will pollinate it, and you will get a full maturing cucumber out of there. And the flower is going to look very similar to this, except that the flower will be on top of a mini cucumber. And you would just put the brush in, touch the center, and that will give you a pollinated female flower that will form a full cucumber. And you can do that in places where you may not have a lot of insects, if you're growing stuff indoors, or if you're just concerned and want to get a greater yield out of your cucumber. You can pollinate your cucumbers. This is one of my pickling cucumber vines. It's mid-August here. I'm in Maryland Zone 7. And the plant itself is beat up. I've dealt with spraying it against diseases and stuff like that, and it's done really, really well. I've gotten a lot of cucumbers out of it. As the season goes on, you might find you're picking cucumbers every day. There's a bunch of 8-inch cucumbers in there, some pickling cucumbers, some Armenian cucumbers. And to be honest with you, I've just had my share of cucumbers. So before I take the plant out, what I usually do is I let 4 or 5 cucumbers go to seed. And when a cucumber goes to seed, it's basically going from the size you'd pick a pickling cucumber at about this size. You take it out green, their seeds aren't mature, the flesh is tender, sweet, and all that good stuff. If you leave it on the vine, the cucumbers will start turning a golden yellow, orange color, and you really want to leave them on there for a while so that they get maybe 3 times, 4 times the size of the cucumber when you would normally pick it. And that allows the seeds to really mature, and you can easily pull out cucumber seeds, dry them for about 7 days, and then you have seeds for next year. Let me show you what it looks like. This is the normal size that you would pick the cucumber, and this is a really good seed cucumber. It's from the same plant, same variety, and you can see how big it really got. It's nice and orange. It's not too soft. You don't want to wait too long because it does start to rot and ferment, and yeah, you can pick the seeds out, but it does smell kind of bad. So you want to get a cucumber that looks like this. You would just split it down the middle, take the seeds out. The seeds you can just put onto a coffee filter, let them dry. I like to use a coffee filter because the seeds tend to stick less to the filter. If you use a paper towel, sometimes they're a little bit hard to get off. What you do, and I just used an example of a smaller pickling cucumber that was turning. The seeds here aren't quite ready, but this is just for the example. You definitely want to take the seeds out of a bigger cucumber like that. So you just put your thumb in, you squeeze the center of the cucumber out, put all the seeds in a sieve, and you just rinse this under in your sink under the spigot and get off all the gel and stuff like that. These are the seeds that would be left. Just let them dry for about 7 days. Then you put them into a airtight container, or you put them into a Ziploc bag, and you'll have cucumber seeds for next year.